Here's a comment. So this came from a video I did a while back about the church speaking up against tyranny, speaking up about tyranny, speaking up, to put tyranny down, kind of thing, right? Because our silence gives tyranny consent to be tyrannical. Anyway, this person's comment really grabbed me because I'm in this position. Now bear with me. The person says they're not saying anything. So the church, the ministers, the priests are not saying anything because they have a wife and children. They have years of their life going to school to earn their chosen profession. Who will stand up with them? These poor souls are only being human. Stand, and I will guarantee that you will stand alone. Your so-called friends will desert you. Wow. Right? That's a wow. That is incredibly accurate, incredibly sad, infuriating, frustrating. True. It's true. People don't speak up because we're afraid we'll lose what we have. People don't speak up because even if we have very little, we're afraid we'll lose it. People of authority, priests, ministers, deacons in the church, we won't speak up because if we speak up, maybe our congregations will be mad at us. There have been stories. There have been stories about pastors. I can think of 2 or 3 in particular. They were non-denominational or Baptist who spoke out against Trump and were let go. Their services were no longer required. Or their church is emptied. Their church is emptied. The leadership didn't want to fire the pastor, and so all the people left until the church had no congregation left except for some bare bones, and then the pastor left in order so that the church could be saved. It's happened. And we know, like in a world of cancellation, which is not a right or left thing. It's people who respond to what you say and what you do, and if they like it, they will gravitate to you, and if you don't like it, and if they don't like it, then they will separate themselves from you. This comment's true. Everything about this comment is true. And we can't dismiss. So we can't dismiss the fact that standing up takes incredible courage. We cannot minimize the fact that standing up and speaking out against power takes incredible courage and a willingness to sacrifice. And if you think about it, it's one thing to say, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for the cause, but am I willing to sacrifice my children? And I'm not talking about, their life, but I am saying their comfort, their happiness, their safety, their warmth, their quality of life. Am I willing to sacrifice those things in order to stand up? Because ultimately, when tyranny comes, that's what is needed. When tyranny comes, to stand up against tyranny, that is what is required. We have to be willing to sacrifice it all. And again, I'm right there with this comment. I'm not. There is nothing about this comment that I'm disagreeing with. I'm simply saying that everything they mention there is something that we have to move beyond. Everything they mention in there is something we have to be willing to say, full steam, damn the torpedoes and full steam ahead. We have to be willing to say, I understand that there's going to be consequences for this, and I'm willing to pay it. This is important enough. I'm willing to pay it. And I know that as I stand up, I may end up standing alone. My friends may desert me. My family may desert me. But I need to do it. You know, in the church tradition, we have these people we call saints. I'm sure you've all heard of saints. Those are the people who live lives that were so exemplary that the church has said, y'all should pay attention to these folks. These folks, they're worthy to be followed. They're worthy to be emulated. They're worthy to be studied. And we also have this group called martyrs. And martyrs are people who died for the faith. They're people who died. Many saints have died for the faith as well, but the martyrs are people specifically who they died for the cause of sharing the gospel. They died for the cause of justice and mercy. They did it not for their neighbor, they did it for God. Right? These people, martyrs, these martyrs, these saints, Jesus. They show us a way forward that is actually quite unpleasant. They tell us that the way forward is actually quite unpleasant. It's not for the faint of heart. Don't take this on assuming that everything will be rosy. It won't be. You know, I've talked about this many times, that the small print on the contract we sign when we become followers of Jesus Christ spells out quite clearly, this ain't necessarily a very comfortable life. And so for us in the church, knowing full well that we must stand up and we must speak to power, we must speak against tyranny, we must speak against authoritarianism, knowing, us in the church knowing full well that we must speak up to protect our local institutions, to protect the freedoms of the people around us, to ensure, to protect ourselves and ensure that we're not influenced by the tyranny that we see coming, by the authoritarianism and the dictatorships that are coming. We've got to do that. Lord, give us the courage. Give us the courage. A friend of mine, I saw him on Saturday. Friend of mine, a mentor of mine. He would never, ever allow me to call him a mentor because he just does not think he was that important to me, but he really was. He's got a great beard. He is the reason why I'm growing my beard the way I am. But anyhow, I digress. He and I were having coffee one day, and he told me a story about a parish. He was the rector of a parish, and it was a downtown parish, and he was doing a lot of work. He was doing a lot of work for the people who lived in the neighborhood. He was doing a lot of work for the poor, for the homeless. He was working with organizations who were helping with the LGBTQ community at that time, and this was at a time when gay folks, they kind of went underground, right? When gay and lesbians, they went underground, it wasn't something that was talked about. And he was doing a lot of work for that crew. He was doing a lot of work with people with addictions. These were his neighbors. These were the people that lived around his church. Now his church, the congregation, that wasn't who they were. They were all people who came in from outside. They drove in, parked there, went to services and left. They didn't live in the neighborhood. Some of them drove an hour to get to this particular church, but most of them didn't live in that neighborhood. And so the time came when they went to my friend and they said, we want you doing more for the actual members of the church. And he said, well, I'm doing everything I can for our neighbors. And they said, well, you can be our priest or you can be theirs, but you can't be both. Now, he is married and he has kids and he has payments and bills. He has student loan debt. He did spend years of his life. I think he's a doctor. I think he has a PhD. But he did, no, PhD or D-Min. Anyway, whatever it is. But he has a doctorate. He spent years of his life in school. He accumulated, debt from school and all that other stuff. And his way of speaking out against what he thought was an unloving attitude that his congregation had, he quit on the spot. Give us that kind of courage, Lord. Give us that kind of courage that we are willing to put others ahead of ourselves to the extent that we're willing to sacrifice those things that make us feel comfortable and safe. Because Lord, you know that's what it's going to take to bring about the world that we dream of. Amen.